At 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in Manhattan, the impossible happened. A SWAT team armed and ready for a routine drug bust kicked down the wrong door and walked straight into the heist of the century. What should have been a perfect crime became a nightmare in seconds, all because of a single digit in an address. But as Detective Marcus Kane dug deeper into this billion-dollar coincidence, he discovered that sometimes the most shocking accidents aren't accidents at all. The glass doors of Manhattan First National Bank exploded inward like a crystal waterfall, shards catching the afternoon sunlight as they scattered across the marble floor. Through the smoke and chaos, black-clad figures poured into the building with military precision, their voices cutting through the air like razors. "NYPD, everybody down now!" Vincent Moreau froze mid-step, his hand still gripping the thermal lance that had been carving through the vault door just moments before. Behind him, Elena Rodriguez dropped to her knees, her face a mask of terror that seemed too genuine for someone who had helped plan this very moment. Tommy Castellano, caught with his tools still scattered around the massive safe, raised his hands slowly, his weathered face showing the resignation of a man who knew his luck had finally run out. The SWAT officers moved with practiced efficiency, their weapons trained on the four figures who had been so close to pulling off what financial experts would later call the most sophisticated bank robbery in New York history. Captain Sarah Brooks, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins, barked orders to her team while surveying the scene with professional detachment. "Secure the suspects. Jenkins, call for backup and the bomb squad. We don't know what kind of equipment they're using on that vault." Detective Marcus Kane arrived 17 minutes later, his unmarked sedan screeching to a key, halt behind the wall of police vehicles that had transformed the financial district into a war zone. At 42, Kane had seen enough crime scenes to know when something didn't add up, and as he stepped through the bank's shattered entrance, every instinct he'd developed over 15 years on the force began screaming that this wasn't what it appeared to be. The vault door bore the distinctive circular scar of a thermal lance, the kind of tool that required months of planning and specialized knowledge to use effectively. The security cameras had been disabled with surgical precision, their circuits fried by what appeared to be a sophisticated electromagnetic pulse device. Even the bank's state-of-the-art motion sensors had been bypassed, using a technique that Kane had only seen in classified FBI manuals. "Captain Brooks," Kane called out, his sharp blue eyes scanning the scene with the intensity of a hawk studying its prey. What was SWAT doing here in the first place? Brooks paused in her coordination of the crime scene, her expression shifting from operational focus to something approaching confusion. "We were executing a warrant for 247 East 42nd Street, drug bust. High-priority target with suspected armed resistance." She gestured toward the bank's address placard. "Somehow we ended up here instead. 247 East 41st Street. Kane felt the first cold finger of suspicion trace down his spine. In his experience, coincidences of this magnitude didn't exist in the real world. Someone had planned this confluence of events, but the question that would drive his investigation for the next 72 hours was simple and terrifying. Who had the power to orchestrate both a billion-dollar heist and the SWAT operation that stopped it? As the suspects were led away in handcuffs, their faces showing varying degrees of shock, confusion, and what Kane could only describe as betrayal, he made his first note in what would become the most complex case of his career. The perfect storm that had destroyed the perfect crime was about to reveal secrets that went far deeper than anyone could imagine. 3 months earlier, Vincent Moreau had stood in the shadow of Manhattan First National Bank, watching the morning shift change with the patience of a predator, studying its prey. To anyone passing by, he appeared to be just another businessman in an expensive suit, perhaps waiting for a client or checking his phone. But behind his calm exterior, Moreau's mind was cataloging every detail of the bank's security protocol with the precision of a Swiss clockmaker. Moreau wasn't just any criminal. He was a former security consultant who had spent 12 years designing the very systems he now planned to defeat. His legitimate career had ended abruptly when a financial scandal destroyed his reputation, leaving him with expertise that few possessed and a burning resentment against the institutions that had cast him aside. The bank before him represented more than just a target. It was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong in his life. The plan that emerged from Moreau's 8 months of preparation was a masterpiece of criminal engineering. Every Tuesday at 2:30 p.m., The bank's security rotation created a 17-minute window when the vault area was monitored by only 2 guards instead of the usual 4. The building's HVAC system, installed during a renovation 2 years prior, provided access to the vault level through a maintenance shaft that Moreau had helped design during his consulting days. Elena Rodriguez had been the key to everything. As a senior teller with 12 years of service and an unblemished record, she had access to security codes that would have taken years to crack through conventional means. Her recruitment had been Moreau's greatest triumph, not through coercion or blackmail, but through carefully cultivated romance that had blossomed over 6 months of seemingly chance encounters at her favorite coffee shop. Eleanor's motivation ran deeper than love, though she didn't know Moreau understood this. Her daughter's medical bills had mounted into 6 figures, and her ex-husband's child support payments had stopped coming when he lost his job. The $50,000 Moreau offered for her cooperation represented more than salvation. It represented hope for a future she thought she'd lost forever. Tommy Castellano brought 30 years of experience to the operation, his reputation in certain circles as unshakable as his steady hands. The 60-year-old safecracker had never been caught, never left evidence, and never worked with amateurs. His agreement to join Moreau's crew was perhaps the strongest endorsement the plan could have received. Tommy's role was simple but crucial: use his thermal lance to cut through the vault door's locking mechanism, while Elena disabled the security cameras from her position at the teller station. Jake Morrison completed the quartet, his skills behind the wheel legendary among those who knew where to look for such talents. His escape route through the subway tunnels was a work of art in itself, a series of maintenance passages and abandoned platforms that would allow the crew to emerge 15 blocks away, invisible among the thousands of commuters who used the system every day. The plan's beauty lay in its simplicity and timing. Elena would trigger a false alarm in the loan department, drawing security attention to the 2nd floor while the crew entered through the HVAC system. Tommy would have exactly 14 minutes to breach the vault before the next security rotation. The electromagnetic pulse device would create a 30-second gap in the camera feeds, long enough for the crew to disappear into the subway tunnels with over $3 million in untraceable bearer bonds. Moreau had run the operation through computer simulations dozens of times, accounting for every variable from weather conditions to traffic patterns. He had studied the personal schedules of key bank employees, mapped the response times of nearby police precincts, and even calculated the acoustic properties of the vault to ensure Tommy's thermal lance wouldn't be heard on the floors above. On the morning of the heist, as Moreau reviewed the plan one final time with his crew in a rented warehouse in Queens, he felt the satisfaction of an artist about to unveil his masterpiece. Every detail had been perfected, every contingency planned for, every risk calculated and minimized. What he couldn't have anticipated was that sometimes the most carefully laid plans are destroyed not by their own flaws, but by forces completely beyond their control. As Tommy loaded his equipment into the panel van that would take them to their rendezvous point, Elena checked her watch nervously, and Jake plotted their escape route one final time. None of them could have imagined that their perfect crime was about to collide with a perfect storm of bureaucratic incompetence and deadly timing. Detective Kane stood in the cramped dispatch center of the NYPD's Manhattan South Precinct, watching the fluorescent lights flicker over banks of computer monitors that hummed with the constant chatter of police communications. The room smelled of stale coffee and stress, but Kane's attention was focused entirely on the pale, trembling woman sitting before him. Dispatcher Jennifer Walsh had been on the job for 8 years, her record spotless until this Tuesday afternoon, when a single keystroke had changed everything. Her fingers shook as she pulled up the incident log on her computer, the blue glow of the screen highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. "The warrant was clear," Walsh said, her voice barely above a whisper. 247 East 42nd Street, Apartment 6B. High-priority narcotics raid. Suspects believed to be armed and extremely dangerous. Captain Brooks requested full tactical support. Kane leaned closer to read the screen, his trained eye immediately catching the discrepancy that had set this entire catastrophe in motion. But the SWAT team went to 247 East 41st Street instead. That's the bank. How does that happen? Walsh's hands covered her face as she relived the moment that would haunt her for years to come. "I was entering the address into the tactical deployment system when my computer glitched," The screen froze for about 10 seconds, and when it came back up, I thought I saw 42nd Street in the address field. But when I transmitted the coordinates to Captain Brooks, she paused, her voice breaking. I must have hit the wrong key during the glitch. I sent them to 41st Street instead. The explanation was plausible, even mundane in its bureaucratic simplicity. Computer glitches happened daily in the department's aging systems, and human error was an unfortunate reality of police work. But Kane's instincts, honed by 15 years of investigating cases where nothing was as it seemed, refused to accept such a convenient coincidence. Captain Brooks appeared in the doorway, her tactical gear replaced by a standard uniform, though her posture still carried the rigid alertness of someone coming down from a high adrenaline operation. "Detective Kane, you wanted to speak with me." "About the deployment?" Kane followed Brooks to a quiet corner of the precinct, away from the curious ears of other officers who were already whispering about the day's extraordinary events. "Walk me through it, Captain. From the moment you received the dispatch to the moment your team breached the bank." Brooks's account was precise and professional, delivered with the clinical detachment of someone who had led hundreds of similar operations. The original target was Marcus Spider Delacroix, a mid-level drug dealer who had been under surveillance for 3 months. Intelligence suggested he was moving a large shipment through his apartment that afternoon, with armed guards and enough product to warrant maximum tactical response. "We had the building under surveillance since 6 a.m., Brooks explained. "Full perimeter, eyes on all exits. When dispatch confirmed the address as 247 East 41st Street, I assumed intelligence had updated the target location. It's not uncommon for dealers to switch safe houses at the last minute." Kane made notes as Brooks spoke, but his mind was already racing ahead to the implications of what he was hearing. "What happened to the original target? Spider Delacroix?" Brooks' expression darkened. "That's the strange part. When we realized our mistake and sent a unit to the correct address on 42nd Street, the apartment was empty, not just of people, of everything, like it had been cleaned out hours before we were supposed to hit it." The cold finger of suspicion that had traced Kane's spine earlier now felt like an ice-cold hand gripping his heart. Someone had known about both operations, the SWAT raid and the bank heist. Someone with access to police intelligence and the technical capability to manipulate computer systems. Someone who had orchestrated this coincidence with surgical precision. Kane's phone buzzed with a text from the forensics team at the bank. What he read made his blood run cold. "Detective Kane, urgent. Found evidence of remote access device connected to bank security system. Professional-grade equipment. This wasn't just a heist. Someone was monitoring the entire operation in real time." As Kane stared at the message, pieces of a larger puzzle began forming in his mind. The thermal lance that had been cutting through the vault door was expensive and difficult to obtain. The electromagnetic pulse device required specialized knowledge to build and deploy. The timing of the SWAT raid wasn't an accident. It was precisely calculated to arrive at the moment when the vault was most vulnerable. Someone had wanted this heist to fail, but not before it had progressed far enough to incriminate everyone involved. The question that would drive Kane's investigation into increasingly dangerous territory was simple. Who had the power, knowledge, and motivation to orchestrate such an elaborate setup? The interrogation room at the Manhattan South Precinct felt smaller than its 12 by 8 dimensions, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows that seemed to age Tommy Castellano by a decade. Kane sat across from the career safecracker, studying the man who had spent 30 years perfecting the art of opening locks that weren't meant to be opened. Tommy's hands, steady enough to perform microsurgery on vault mechanisms, trembled slightly as he reached for the paper cup of coffee Kane had provided. His weathered face showed the resignation of a man who knew his luck had finally run out, but there was something else in his eyes, something that looked disturbingly like relief. 30 years, detective, Tommy said, his gravelly voice carrying the weight of decades spent in shadows. 30 years and I've never been caught, never left a trace, never worked with amateurs, never took unnecessary risks. You want to know what's eating at me? It's not that I got caught, it's how I got caught. Kane leaned forward, his instincts telling him that Tommy was about to reveal something crucial. What do you mean? Tommy's laugh was bitter, like broken glass scraping against concrete. Vincent Moreau is good, detective. Better than good. He's brilliant. The plan he showed us was flawless. Every detail, every contingency, every possible failure point accounted for. But there's one thing he couldn't plan for, and that's what's been bothering me since those SWAT boys kicked down the door. Which is? Vincent knew things he shouldn't have known. Security rotations that change weekly, camera blind spots that were classified information, even the thermal signatures of the vault door's locking mechanism. That kind of intelligence doesn't come from 8 months of observation, detective. It comes from someone on the inside. Kane made notes as Tommy spoke, but his mind was already connecting dots that painted an increasingly complex picture. You think Moreau had help beyond Elena Rodriguez? Tommy shook his head slowly, his eyes focusing on something beyond the interrogation room's walls. Elena was perfect for her role: access to security codes, knowledge of daily routines, emotional investment in the operation. But the technical specifications Vincent had, the building blueprints that showed every HVAC duct and maintenance shaft, that information came from someone with administrative access to the bank's security systems. Kane's phone buzzed with another update from forensics. Elena Rodriguez's financial records showed deposits totaling $15,000 over the past 6 months, all from accounts that traced back to shell companies registered in Delaware. But more interesting were the withdrawals. Exactly $50,000 had been moved to a medical billing company in New Jersey, matching Tommy's earlier statement about her daughter's treatment costs. "Tell me about Elena," Kane said. "How did Moreau recruit her?" Tommy's expression softened slightly, the hardened criminal revealing an unexpected capacity for empathy. "That girl was drowning, detective. Medical bills, ex-husband who disappeared, working 2 jobs just to keep her head above water. Vincent found her vulnerability and exploited it, but not in the way you might think. He made her believe he loved her." The interrogation continued for another hour, with Tommy providing details that painted an increasingly sophisticated picture of the operation. The thermal lance had been purchased through a series of intermediaries, its serial numbers filed off and its purchase history erased from supplier records. The electromagnetic pulse device was military-grade, the kind of equipment that required security clearances to obtain. Even the escape route through the subway tunnels showed knowledge of maintenance schedules and security protocols that weren't publicly available. Kane's next stop was Elena Rodriguez, who sat in a separate interrogation room with tears streaming down her face, and a public defender who looked barely old enough to have passed the bar exam. Elena's story was heartbreaking in its simplicity. A single mother facing impossible circumstances who had been manipulated by someone she thought loved her. "He was so charming," Elena whispered, her voice broken by sobs. 6 months of coffee dates, flowers, little gifts for my daughter. I thought I'd finally found someone who cared about us. The money he offered was supposed to be a loan just to help with the medical bills. I never thought..." But as Kane listened to Elena's account, inconsistencies began to emerge. Her description of Moreau's apartment didn't match the address they had on file. The romantic dinners she described had taken place at restaurants that had been closed for renovations during the time frame she specified. Even her story about how Moreau had proposed the bank job contained details that didn't align with the timeline of the operation. "Elena," Kane said gently, "I need you to think carefully. During your relationship with Vincent, did he ever mention knowing other people who worked at the bank? Other employees, security personnel, management?" Elena's eyes widened as if she was remembering something she had forgotten. "There was one time, about 2 months ago, we were having dinner, and his phone rang. He said he had to take it. Something about a security consultation, but when he came back, he seemed angry. He kept muttering about someone who thought they were smarter than everyone else, and how some people needed to be taught a lesson." Kane felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. The bank's security chief, David Chen, had been notably absent during the heist, claiming he was attending a conference in Boston, but preliminary checks had failed to confirm his presence at any security industry. Events that day. As Kane reviewed the evidence gathered so far, a disturbing pattern emerged. Someone with intimate knowledge of both the bank's security systems and police operational procedures had orchestrated events with precision that bordered on the supernatural. The question was no longer whether this was an inside job. It was identifying which insider had the access, motivation, and technical capability to pull off such an elaborate setup. The web of deception was beginning to unravel, but Kane had a sinking feeling that the truth, when it finally emerged, would be more shocking than anyone could imagine. The FBI field office in Manhattan felt like a fortress of steel and glass, its sterile corridors echoing with the purposeful footsteps of agents who dealt in secrets that could topple governments. Kane followed Special Agent Patricia Vasquez through a maze of security checkpoints, his detective's shield feeling inadequate among the federal credentials. That granted access to this world of classified operations and national security. Agent Vasquez was a 20-year veteran of the Bureau's Financial Crimes Unit, her graying hair and laugh lines evidence of decades spent unraveling conspiracies that most people couldn't imagine. As she led Kane into a secure conference room, her expression carried the weight of revelations that would fundamentally change his understanding of the case. "Detective Kane," Vasquez said, settling into a chair across from him and opening a thick manila folder. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels, but the events at Manhattan First National have forced our hand. Elena Rodriguez has been working for the FBI for the past 8 months. Kane felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about the case suddenly shifted into a new configuration, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle being rearranged to reveal an entirely different picture. Elena was approached by our Financial Crimes Unit last year," Vasquez continued, "when our investigation into money laundering operations identified suspicious transactions flowing through Manhattan First National. We suspected someone inside the bank was facilitating the movement of illegal funds, but we needed evidence that would hold up in federal court." Kane's mind raced through the implications. So Elena's cooperation with Moreau's heist was part of a larger operation to expose the bank's role in organized crime, Vasquez confirmed. Elena was instructed to accept Moreau's recruitment and participate in the planning phase while feeding us intelligence about the operation. The plan was to arrest the entire crew during the heist, with Elena's cooperation serving as evidence of the bank's security vulnerabilities. But the explanation only raised more questions in Kane's mind. If Elena was working for you, how did Swat end up at the bank by accident? That timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Vasquez's expression darkened, and Kane could see the frustration that came from an operation that had spiraled beyond anyone's control. "That's where this gets complicated, Detective. Elena's handler was Special Agent Robert Chen, David Chen's younger brother. The revelation hit Kane like a physical blow. The security chief's connection to the FBI operation explained how someone had access to information from both sides of the law, but it also suggested a level of corruption that reached into the highest levels of federal law enforcement. Robert Chen had been feeding his brother information about our investigation," Vasquez continued. "David knew we were closing in on the money laundering operation, and he knew Elena was working for us, but instead of trying to escape prosecution, he decided to eliminate everyone who could testify against him." Kane's phone buzzed with an urgent message from the forensics team. David Chen's alibi for the day of the heist had fallen apart. Security cameras at Boston's Logan Airport showed him catching a flight back to New York that morning, not attending a security conference as he had claimed. His cell phone records showed calls to known associates of Marcus Spider Delacroix, the drug dealer who had mysteriously vanished before the SWAT raid. David orchestrated the entire setup, Kane realized, pieces of the conspiracy finally falling into place. He knew about Elena's FBI cooperation, he knew about Moreau's heist plans, and he had access to police dispatch systems through his brother. He arranged for the SWAT team to raid the bank at precisely the right moment to catch everyone in the act. Vasquez nodded grimly. David's plan was elegant in its brutality. Eliminate Moreau and his crew as witnesses to the bank's money laundering operations. Discredit Elena as a criminal conspirator rather than an FBI informant. And position himself as the security professional who had been warning about vulnerabilities that no one would listen to. But Kane saw an even darker dimension to the conspiracy. He wasn't just eliminating witnesses, he was planning to steal the money himself. With everyone dead or discredited, he could access the bearer bonds in the vault and disappear before anyone realized what had happened. The FBI agent's confirmation sent chills down Kane's spine. David Chen had spent years building a reputation as one of the most trusted security professionals in the financial industry, using that reputation to facilitate criminal operations while appearing to combat them. His position at Manhattan First National gave him access to both legitimate security systems and the criminal networks that sought to exploit them. "There's something else," Vasquez said, pulling out a surveillance photograph that made Kane's blood run cold. The image showed David Chen meeting with Marcus Spider Delacroix in a Queens warehouse, the same warehouse where Moreau had briefed his crew on the morning of the heist. Kane stared at the photograph, understanding finally dawning on him. Chen was playing all sides. He was feeding information to the criminals, cooperating with the FBI investigation and planning to eliminate everyone when the operation went down. As the full scope of David Chen's conspiracy became clear, Kane realized that the perfect storm that had destroyed the perfect crime was actually the result of meticulous planning by someone who understood both criminal psychology and law enforcement procedures better than anyone had imagined. The question now was whether they could prove Chen's guilt before he realized his plan had been exposed and disappeared forever. The hunt for the real mastermind was about to begin, and Kane had a sinking feeling that David Chen was already several moves ahead of them. David Chen's office on the 32nd floor of Manhattan First National Bank looked like a shrine to security excellence, its walls lined with certificates, awards, and photographs documenting a career built on protecting other people's money. Kane stood in the doorway, watching Chen pack personal items into a leather briefcase with the methodical precision of someone who had been planning this moment for months. "Detective Kane," Chen said without looking up, his voice carrying none of the surprise that an innocent man should have shown at finding a police officer in his private office. "I wondered when you'd figure it out." Chen was younger than Kane had expected, perhaps 45, with the kind of understated confidence that came from years of operating in shadows while maintaining a public facade of integrity. His expensive suit and perfectly groomed appearance projected success and respectability, making it hard to reconcile his image with the web of corruption Kane had uncovered. "Going somewhere, Mr. Chen?" Kane asked, his hand resting casually on his service weapon, while backup officers positioned themselves in the hallway outside. Chen smiled, closing his briefcase with a soft click that sounded like a period at the end of a long sentence. "Switzerland, actually. I have a consulting contract with a private security firm in Zurich. The pay is excellent, and the extradition laws are favorable to men in my position." Kane stepped into the office, his eyes cataloging details that would become evidence in what promised to be one of the most complex criminal prosecutions in Manhattan's history. Chen's computer was still running, its screen showing financial records that documented years of money laundering operations flowing through the bank's systems. "You want to know how I did it?" Chen said, settling into his leather chair with the relaxed posture of someone who no longer had anything to hide. "It's really quite simple when you understand that security systems are only as strong as the people who operate them." Kane remained silent, allowing Chen's ego to drive him toward the kind of detailed confession that prosecutors dream about. In his experience, criminals of Chen's sophistication couldn't resist explaining their brilliance, especially when they believed they were about to escape consequences. "Vincent Moreau was perfect for my purposes," Chen continued, "a disgraced security consultant with the skills to plan a sophisticated heist and the motivation to see it through. I spent months cultivating him, feeding him information about the bank's vulnerabilities while making him believe he was discovering them himself." Kane's phone was recording every word, but he also took notes to ensure no detail would be lost. "And Elena Rodriguez?" Chen's smile turned cold, revealing the calculating predator beneath his professional exterior. "Elena was the FBI's asset, not mine, but my brother. Robert kept me informed about their operation, which gave me opportunities that I couldn't have created on my own. When I learned Elena was cooperating with federal investigators, I saw a chance to eliminate multiple threats simultaneously." The confession continued for another 20 minutes, with Chen describing a conspiracy that spanned 3 years and involved corrupted officials at multiple levels of law enforcement. He had used his position as security chief to identify wealthy clients who needed discreet financial services, then connected them with criminal organizations that could provide those services for a substantial fee. "The beauty of the plan was its simplicity," Chen explained. "Let Moreau's crew breach the vault, while Elena disabled the security systems. Arrange for SWAT to arrive at the precise moment when everyone was most vulnerable. In the chaos that followed, I would access the vault myself and remove the bearer bonds that my clients had deposited for safekeeping." Kane felt a chill as he realized how close Chen had come to succeeding. "What about the original drug raid? Marcus Delacroix?" Chen's laugh was genuinely amused, as if Kane had asked about a particularly clever magic trick. "Spider never existed, detective. The entire drug operation was fiction, addresses that led nowhere, surveillance reports that documented imaginary criminals, intelligence briefings that described threats that were never real. I needed SWAT to be in the right place at the right time, so I created a reason for them to be there." The scope of Chen's manipulation was staggering. He had fabricated an entire criminal investigation to provide cover for his real operation, using his brother's FBI credentials to make the fiction seem authentic. The dispatcher's computer glitch that had sent SWAT to the wrong address wasn't an accident. It was Chen remotely accessing the dispatch system to redirect the tactical team to his chosen target. "You made one mistake," Kane said, standing to signal the backup officers who were waiting in the hallway. "You assumed everyone involved was as corruptible as you were." Chen's confident expression flickered for the first time since Kane had entered the office. "What do you mean?" Kane smiled, enjoying the moment when the predator realized he had become prey. "Tommy Castellano, 30 years as a professional criminal, and he's never been caught because he never works with people he doesn't trust completely. When he realized you had manipulated the entire operation, he made a deal with the district attorney's office. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity." The color drained from Chen's face as he understood that his perfect plan had been undone by the one variable he couldn't control: the professional integrity of a career criminal who refused to be anyone's pawn. As Kane placed handcuffs on David Chen's wrists, he reflected on the case that had consumed his life for the past week. The perfect heist had indeed been perfect, not as a robbery, but as a trap designed to eliminate everyone who threatened Chen's criminal empire. But like all perfect plans, it had been destroyed by the one element that no amount of preparation could account for: human nature. Chen was led away in handcuffs, his Swiss consulting contract worthless and his reputation destroyed. But as Kane watched the security chief disappear into the elevator that would take him to a federal holding cell, he couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere in the shadows of Manhattan's financial district, other David Chens were watching and learning from his mistakes. The perfect crime, Kane realized, wasn't the one that succeeded. It was the one that taught the next generation of criminals how to avoid getting caught.